Good evening. Good evening to one and all. Good evening to all the seniors, friends, and participants. I sincerely welcome all the participants and others on behalf of Legal Speak Team webinars. We also welcome Dr. Krishna Kumar, who is going to give today's presentation on the topic of overview of forfeiture of loss. Dr. Krishnakumar is early worked in Central Excise Department for nearly 2 decades. Then, due to interest in law, he studied and completed his law course and started his practice. During his practice, due to his love and passion on teaching profession, he has completed his ML and he had been a guest faculty member in Tamil Nadu Ambedkar Law University. And afterwards, he continued his research and got conferred PhD in anti-money laundering law. Now he has been as a guest professor in ICI New Delhi. We Legal Speak team webinars wishes him all success in his future career. Over to Dr. Krishna Kumar for his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Uh, Good evening to all of you. Is it audible?
Yes, yes, audible, sir. You can tell.
We will be seeing the overview of forfeiture law. Basically, idea behind is to teach, what are the laws which takes care of forfeiture of properties. Property definition is there in each law. I'll be covering four enactments in this session, during this session, seriatim from the date of enactment of the particular laws. So, for example, in India, the forfeiture law regime started with SAFEMA. SAFEMA is also pronounced as SAFEM FOPA, SAFEM bracket FOPA. So, many of the lawyers would be may not be knowing. I don't say that it is there is nothing, there is a lack of knowledge or anything, but this particular enactment is known to very few among the lawyers and the practicing community because of its very nature. In fact, this SAFEM FOPA, normally it is referred to as SAFEMA. So, smugglers and the expansion of the act is Smugglers and Foreign Exchange Manipulators Forfeiture of Property Act. In fact, Mudimanan used to say, Mr. KJ, our senior, would be correctly pronouncing the act itself. So, many would not be able to even pronounce law itself. In fact, this was the first enactment as per the forfeiture laws in India is concerned. In 1976, this law was brought into force in India. In fact, I will be covering in this session four enactments. I will be only restricting my topics or the class with reference to civil forfeiture. So there are in certain laws which we are going to see today, there will be civil forfeiture and there will be a penal consequences also. Like for example, Prevention of Money Laundering Act and Benami Property Act. We have and NDPS Act also. We have penal consequences like imprisonment is there. I'm not going to cover that because basically the idea is to each one of you, maybe the participants or the audience, know what are all the forfeiture laws available in India. So while I was doing some research on this topics, especially with the PMLA, there are a lot of gray areas which in fact made me to disseminate knowledge. Why? Because any one of us, maybe myself or X or Y or one of my participants may be trying to purchase a property. So if you buy a property, suppose if the particular property is already attached in any of the four enactments, what will be the consequences? The consequences are very severe. In fact, now the law has been amended, especially in PMLA after Justice V. Ramasubramanian in the case of Indian Bank. He put a famous case, said the innocent or the bona fide purchasers cannot be, be a victim of the law. The law was amended. Now the law takes care, or rather protects the bona fide purchaser from this regime. However, he has to pass through the test provided under law because the law or the lawmaker or the authority or the judiciary may not know whether the person is really a bona fide purchaser or a friend of the accused. So it will take the process of law to finally find out whether the person himself is a bona fide purchaser. So in fact, I was yesterday discussing with another friend. Whenever you try to purchase a property, first of all, you should know whether the property is earlier under attachment. Knowing well that the property is under attachment, if you go and purchase, you are committing your own suicide or harakiri. So that is basically very important. In fact, this SAFEMA also, to be frank, I did not know the law until I joined this particular wing of SAFEMA in Chennai for a deputation in the year 2000. In fact, I went for a 1-year deputation. I came out within 10 months for certain personal reasons. So this Safima, unfortunately, why it did not succeed? Because it's very small enactment which has only 27 sections. In fact, even Bare Act is not available. Yesterday, I went to Sitaraman. I wanted to just have another book, but I wanted to have a Bare Act for reference. He said none of the bookseller in that shop was aware what is Safima. They were only FEMA. So many, even in the bookshop, does not know, because this act does not sell. Bare Act 27 sections, which we will take a PDF printout and refer. So this Safima, coming back to, I will be covering 4 forfeiture laws. One is Safima, 1976 was the first forfeiture law enactment. Next comes NDPS Act, Electronic Drugs and Psychoactive Substances Act 1985. This was amended in the year 1989 to provide specifically a chapter 5A, to take care of the forfeiture of properties. So that was the second law in India as far as the Indian regime is concerned. Third comes the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, which came into effect in fact on 1st July 2005. So that is the third enactment which takes care of forfeiture of laws. Fourth enactment is Benami Property Provision Benami Property Provision Transaction Act 1988. In fact, you would recall this 1988 Act was a very major failure as far as the legislature is concerned, because it failed miserably because there was no rule was framed. In fact, from 1988 to 2016, though the section says rules will be framed to take care of the act, no rule was framed till 2016. So the law was amended. Rather, instead of repealing the act, the government, I'm not going deeper into that for very obvious reasons, the government did not repeal the 1988 Act and bring a separate Economic Property Act 2016. In fact, it really, there was in fact, the 7 sections of the old Act was revived with another new Act with more than 17 sections. So the Economic Property Act is the last in the forfeiture law regime, which is which was brought into force in the year 2016. So I will be covering all these 4 forfeiture laws. What are all the provisions which are available to forfeit properties under these 4 enactments? What are all the, what are all the, this may be of a, once you know the subject, it will be even useful. Tomorrow a person comes to you with a brief, a client comes, there is an attachment sitting under Safima. You should not know what is, if you ask him, because now the clients are more aware. In fact, the smugglers or the convicts or the clients, I don't want to comment actually, they may be knowing better than you. They will know what is the law behind the such enactment. So if you are unable to know the provisions, you will be losing a client, and it will be not a proper thing to show your negativeness before the client. So Safima takes care of illegally acquired properties of smugglers and foreign exchange manufacturers. In fact, this was brought into net when smugglers under the Customs Act, the old Sea Customs Act, the Customs Act 1962. So for foreign exchange, basic idea behind it is to take care of the properties. Basically, what the international regime, the forfeiture of property is now only convicting a person, accused, or an offender with imprisonment. He will go into a jail. He will live a king's life even inside the jail, and he will come back with all his property after 10 years. He may get acquitted in the meantime, or he may get released after good conduct or whatever it may be, and he will come out and he will enjoy his entire fruit, or his entire generation will enjoy the properties. So the idea behind the forfeiture law regime universally is to forfeit the property. So that is what the PMLA says. Anti-money laundering law says forfeit the property or hit the person where it hits him most. In fact, when we are handling the PMLA cases, we are really coming to see the predicate the stage of the offenders, the so-called offenders or the alleged offenders. They are property is starting from immovable property to movable property, like even the bank accounts, FDs, everything. They are unable to even pay the lawyers' fees because they don't have money there. So such is the state. You might be knowing that some of the VIPs whose properties are attached or attachment or in foreign countries, they are traveling by bus because they don't have money, they can't come out. So the idea behind forfeiture law is once you forfeit the property, the offender will not be in the idea. He will not again, it is very difficult for him to come again and commit the offense and generate profits of crime, buy the properties. By the time he will not be able to see that already he will be halfway through this life and all. So the idea behind it, once you forfeit the property, that is a major punishment. Whatever the imprisonment under each law will not definitely be a hindrance or block to the criminal. So only if you forfeit the property, they will at least be they will try to reform themselves. So basically, if you see the Safima, the provisions are there. Earlier, no, it was not. Though the law object of the law is to take care of the smugglers and forex manipulators. In fact, when the law was brought, you might be aware that foreign exchange, the draconian, the people used to say the draconian foreign exchange regulation at FARA was enforced. In fact, that was replaced in the year 1999 by FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act. The basic difference between FARA and FEMA regime, in fact, with FARA and Customs Act, the SAFEMA was more slightly powerful. Now under the FEMA regime, there is no, in fact, you will see that only when there is an imprisonment, arrest power, and which consequently follows with imprisonment, the law will be little bit stringent, and it will have a command for the authorities to enforce the law. Currently under FEMA, there is no arrest power, there is no imprisonment, as per only the penal provisions are there. Only the penal provisions are there. Next slide, please. So the idea behind the SAFEMA is, as the earlier, relatives and associates and confidants. The law says, and the preamble of the law says, the idea behind is to forbid the not alone the offenders. The law does not say it will only forbid the properties of the offenders. It will forbid the properties of offenders, his relatives, his associates, and confidants. Confidants, like this relative and the terminology. I'm not going deeper into that because it's a big definition which will bring in ambit the relatives under any company law or any other equivalent law, not practically any other law. Similarly, the associate is a beautiful terminology which is kind of the SAFEMA. So any associate of a smuggler, a foreign exchange manipulator, will also, his property is also liable for forfeiture. Why the idea behind this terminology is, normally the smuggler, any person, any offender for that matter, he will not try to keep the property in his own name. He will try to keep it in his wife's name, brother-in-law's name, father-in-law's name, something like that. Relatives, some among the relatives, where so that at a later stage he can enjoy. Even if there is an investigation, he will try to dodge the investigation, saying that he is not owning this property. Similarly, friends and associates will be another terminology where the properties are. This is also covered under benami property. So, who are all the persons who are now coming back to SAFEMA, or smugglers and foreign exchange manipulators acts? Who are all the persons? So before going to the two provisions of two enactments are similar as far as the proceedings, what we are trying to discuss in the entire session, or quasi-judicial proceedings where only the authorities will be taking care of. There is no court. Virtually there is no special court or court involved in this because there is not a criminal area. This is civil proceedings or civil forfeiture. So the adjudication will be done by the quasi-judicial authorities under respective enactment. So there is a applied remedy available. In fact, if you see the provisions, SAFEMA and the NDPS Act are really a mirror remain among the provisions, because SAFEMA was the first come into force. So when the NDPS Act was also brought, the similar provisions are brought. The entire the provisions are almost a copy paste or a mirror image of SAFEMA. So the authorities and their functions and the quasi-judicial functions under SAFEMA and NDPS Chapter 5A will be similar as far as provisions are concerned, while the later enactment, like the PMLA and Benami Property 2016, PMLA 2005 are similar because they are in a different segment of history. So overall, coming back to categories of persons. So there are 5 categories of persons who will be attracted under the SAFEMA. So if any person, first of all, a person has to be attracted under the 5 categories to bring his property into forfeiture proceeding. If the person, for example, Mr. X is there, if he doesn't fall under this 5 category, naturally the second, only when the person, Mr. X or Mr. A, falls under the 5 category, next action of forfeiture of property will start. If the person, Mr. X, does not belong to the 5 category, the question of forfeiture of property does not arise. Next, for example, Mr. A falls into the 5 category, then since he fulfilled the first condition, his properties are liable for forfeiture proceedings under the Act. So we'll see. Overall, the persons covered under the Act is the persons who are convicted under Customs Act or FARA. So involving the law has given this threshold limit. Why? Because this threshold limit is normally given to avoid harassment to a small time offenders, maybe 5,000, 10,000. Suppose there is a FARA violation of 1 lakh, 50,000, 25,000. So for this purpose, the fellow should not be harassed. So the idea behind is to restrict, because there is no administrative mechanism, or the machinery under a department is very limited to take care of the issue. So any persons convicted persons either under Customs Act or FARA will be covered under this. Next category, detention. So coffee goes by knowing conservation of foreign exchange and prevention of smuggling activities. This is a purely a preventive detention statute. If this statute takes care of preventive detention, because idea behind this is the smugglers, if they are let loose, they will go on, they will travel 6 times, 8 times, 10 times a year and start smuggling. Once this preventive detention under Kapi Kosa will at least put them behind bars or inside the prison for 1 year, so that you will at least forget about what is smuggling, and there will be a little menace for them. Then another person has to be trained to smuggle. So the idea of it is usually a detention statute Kapi Kosa. So the trigger for Safima is the person should, Mr. A or Mr. X should be detained under Kapi Kosa. And this particular detention should not be revoked or set aside. There are provisions under Kapi Kosa where the detention or later set aside or revoked. So if it is not revoked, there may be a question. At the time of forfeiture proceedings, he may be detained. After some time, the detention may be set aside or revoked. So if it is revoked or set aside, the forfeiture proceedings will have a different impact. So the law says the detention should be valid detention. It should not be invoked or revoked or set aside. Next, relatives of the above two categories. Person to second category, any relatives who fall under person to persons will also be covered. Associates of person to categories covered under 4. Next is holders of property previously held by 1 and 2. This is actually the idea behind the legislative intent is to, normally the idea behind any transaction is to confuse the law enforcement agency. For example, I am an offender, I buy the property, I transfer the property into A in a matter of 1 year. Then property is transferred to B, from A to B. All are my relatives or close associate or confidants. From B to C, it is transferred, and C to D. So this circuitous transaction is only to confuse. Suppose the law agency has to come from D to A and then catch B. So that will be very difficult. The trial will be very difficult for the investigation. So the idea behind this is, so the law says holders of property are also covered under this category. Of course, this is person to holders is covered. The law gives, actually it takes care, it says that the first two holders are to, they are automatically covered, and the third holder of the property, I am not going deeper into this issue, the third holder of the property or the current holder of the property, for example, has to prove his transfer in good faith. For example, I purchase a property from Mr. X. It appears that he has smuggled and he is he is offender under Customs Act, and his property is being forfeited under Safima. So I buy the property without knowing these things, and I am a bona fide purchaser. I don't have any dealing, not even single 0.0001%. I don't have any dealing. I don't even see him at all. So all this, I am a bona fide purchaser. I have lawful proof for the entire consideration which I have paid to the transfer of property. So in such a case, the onus is on the bona fide purchaser. So the law here, if you see, it takes care of even the bona fide purchaser. Next slide, please. So section 3, first we have seen overall the persons who are covered. So now we have to see what is the definition of illegal acquired property. Section 3, first see, the Safima describes what is illegal acquired property. This will be almost similar when we see the NTS Act. So it says property obtained by income. In fact, the law says the property acquired wholly or partly from income or earnings. Any activity prohibited under any law. So if you see a sweeping power of this enactment, it doesn't conclude, though we have seen the object. The object is to prohibit the properties acquired by the customs smugglers under the Customs Act, not customs smugglers under the Customs Act, and terra offenders. So here, if you see, it has expanded the scope. So in fact, this constitution validity and all has been upheld by the Supreme Court in the case of Attorney General versus Amrit Rao Das. So the law is still valid. In fact, it took 76, the judgment of Storms in the year 1996 or 97, I believe. So the constitutional validity is upheld. Here it says any activity prohibited under any law. If you see the other aspect, we have seen the earlier slide, the laws, the object said to avoid people accumulating wealth by avoiding income tax, by avoiding wealth tax, by avoiding other tax fiscal enactment. So here, even assuming that a smuggler is having a property, so assume that there is a property worth 100 rupees. So assume that 70 rupees is the smuggler's income. The 20 may be other income, which is a tax evasion or which is a wealth tax evasion or income tax. Even then, it will come under the ambit of this illegal acquired property. So the definition is very well, without any loophole, the law tries to take care of this property. Property acquired in contravention of second clause says there are. I have added from the definition just to easy to understand. Contravention of any law. Again, if you see, it says contravention of any law. It can be any law. It can be, if you see, coming back to PMLA, there are restricted enactments. So beyond that enactment, here there are Safima does not restrict. It can be any law for the time being force in India. Source of the third comes source of the property cannot be proved. So whenever the perpetual proceeding start, it is for the accused or the defendant to prove that the source of the fraud, because the issuing authority, notice authority will not be knowing. He can't presume that it is a legally acquired property. Always it is the burden of proof, in all this enactment is on the accused. FEMA, NDBS, PMLA, and because it is not easy for the prosecution. All these abundance are forensic offenders who are well trained. They have done. They have demolished all the traces. So it is difficult for the law enforcement agency to get any evidence. So it is previously so it is very difficult for them to. So that is why the last is it is for the noticee, or we can call him as defendant, or we can call him as accused, to prove that the source are from licit or illicit sources. If it is not proved, it is liable for forfeiture. Property acquired out of consideration. So traceable to three categories of this. Again, we have seen in the Customs Act also, section 124, I believe, where the proceeds of the sale of smuggled activities is also liable to. Suppose I don't have the smuggled property, I don't have the imported smuggled items, I only have the consideration, sale consideration, still it is liable for confiscation of the customs. Similarly, any consideration which is arising out of the illegally acquired property is also liable for attachment under this scheme. Next, property held by a person who is not transferring in good faith. For this, we have seen earlier, the last clause, the person itself says, a person, if he is not a transfer in good faith, if he is not for adequate consideration, this will be liable for, this is termed as a illegally acquired property. For example, you have stated it may be a confidant of that accused, he may be a relative of the accused, he may be a associate of the accused. So in such a case, beyond 2 degrees. So the law gives beyond 2 degrees only. First 2 degrees, the presumption is that it is the property of the accused. This is acquired by income. Now I am trying to bring the simple definition is simplified in the Supreme Court judgment 2014 1 SCR 885, where it says acquired by income or earnings. If you see, you go and see the read the definition, it is very large and it is very deep discussion. But the Supreme Court has narrowed down finally this edition. Income or earnings, assets or asset. First, it should be income or by any assets, no property acquired by income or earnings, or assets derived or obtained from or attributed to. It can be from or it can be attributed to any activity prohibited by or under any law. But it can be any activity prohibited by any law or under any law. So the Supreme Court, in 2 lines, it clearly defines what is the definition of illegally acquired property. Next slide, please. So if you see the definition, section 3, subclause 3, it is very, very simple. If you see, what you can't say whether it is a crisp definition or it is a compact definition. It's a perfect definition. Law, I have only extracted the definition. Property includes any interest. This is the definition under SAFEMA. Property includes any interest in property, movable or immovable. So while we take the entire session through this day, it will be any property, movable or immovable, tangible or intangible, corporeal or incorporeal, are all coming under this category. So as far as illegal property is concerned, CA, here the CA is competent authority. So competent authority, as far as the SAFEMA proceedings and NDBS Act proceedings are coming back to this office, the SAFEMA, there is a separate office which comes functions for the purpose of enforcing the SAFEMA and NDBS Act, especially for Forfeiture of Property Acts. Nobody will be known. In fact, it is in a small flat in GLTT Road near that Ramakrishna School, Pilligro. So this is directly coming under the Income Tax Department. So many only, but due to transfer reason, only central excise officers go and serve as deputation. In fact, people are invited on deputation. In fact, for the entire South India, this only one office is taking care of the entire administration and mechanism. Totally with only 3 officers who are the head of the superintendent and inspector. So and one assistant director and one deputy director. I don't know the present mechanism of this office. So CA is the competent authority. Competent authority is there. He is in the rank of Commissioner of Customs or Commissioner of Central Excise. So he will be the authority who will be adjudicating the case of forfeiture of property. So you will find the paradigm shift as far as this officer is directly is appointed here. He is authority, he is appointed by the IRS officer, he is serving officer of the government. In fact, he will be adjudicating the forfeiture. In fact, for CA will be taking care of SAFEMA as far as the NDBS Act. But as far as the Benami Property Act and the PMLA separate authority, adjudicating authority is separately sitting in New Delhi. But of course, he is also appointed by the government. He also comes under the domain of Ministry of Finance, Department of Revenue, but he is an independent authority. But this authority is a departmental authority. Competent authority has to issue a notice. No, here the main the drawback for this the SAFEMA to fail because there is no mechanism for investigation. So this entire authority, 3 or 4 officers, have to depend on income tax authority because the basic idea being they get the notice how the property forfeiture triggers, when detention order is received from authority, when arrest, when coffee gets the conviction order is passed, which is received by the authority. All these things are then you just because you get detention order in the name of A, B, and C, you have to know what are the properties, and it is not easy. If you get the detention order of A, B, and C, how do you know that he is having a property? Nobody will give it in pattern. Nobody will invite you to his house and say, these are all the properties I am giving you copies of my child deeds. Nobody will do that. So the mechanism why it failed, because it has to take care of, it has to depend on the income tax authority. Income tax authorities are supposed to provide with the information to the appellate authority under section 18 to go ahead with the forfeiture proceeding. So entire investigation and survey has to be done only by the income tax authority. So this is one of the reasons why the particular enactment failed to proceed. Next slide, please. This section 6 takes care of issue of notice. So this is almost similar to any central excise or service tax or GST or customs. We have a show cause notice, we have a reply to show cause, we have adjudication. So here under SAFEMA, section 6 takes care of the show cause notice. Same format of almost similar, but it will be, since it is a forfeiture law, it will be wording will be similarly different. So it is almost adjudication is same as far as the commission adjudication in central excise regime or a service tax regime. Next, section 7 takes section 6 takes care of notice. Section 7 takes care of forfeiture order, freeing the person. So suppose the competent authority issues a notice to the forfeiture of property. So it may be the offender, or it may be A as the offender, B will be the relative, C will be the associate officer. So A, B, and C are issued with notice. They have to bring, they have to come and file all the evidence in support of the case. So now, if any notice is issued, it is incumbent on the notice is to bring all the evidences before the authorities to know that only thing is they can raise the question of law, another thing that is not prevented under law. But main is they have to show the sources of income for purchase of property. So that is very important. If the sources are explained in full, the authority they draw further proceedings. I don't want to comment on the orders of the authority, but the law says it is incumbent on the persons accused or defendants to give proof of the source of income. So, for example, 6 notice is issued after hearing a party, after taking the evidences on record, the authority and the competent authority under section 7 will pass an order confirming the attachment of property. Here, once the order is confirmed, it is automatically forfeited, stands forfeited to the government. This is slight difference between this first 2 enactment and the PMLA. Though it is there, it is confirmation of attachment, but the forfeiture is not there. As far as PMLA is concerned, only after completion of trial in the criminal code, the properties are later confiscated. So the difference here, because SAFEMA, there is no trial, there is no imprisonment, there is no arrest. So the directly it ends with the forfeiture of property. So here there is another option which is very rare in forfeiture enactment. It is there only in SAFEMA and NDPS. If you say if the source of acquisition of property is explained more than 50%, to be from licit sources, under section 9 the authority can release the property on payment of fine in lieu of forfeiture. This is always there in, so we have seen in Customs Act, the fine in lieu of confiscation is also offered for certain categories of Customs Act evasion involvement. So here, for example, I have properties issued notice 1 crore worth of property. Suppose if I had proved 55 lakhs is from my bona fide and genuine income, licit income, so that means more than 50% of the property is explained. So here, the authority is bound. I can make a plea before the authority. Instead of forfeiting, release it to me on payment of a fine. So here the fine will be 1 1/5 of the value of the property. That will be, so if I pay this fine in lieu of forfeiture, the property stands released. If I don't pay the fine, automatically the property will be stand forfeited to the government. Next slide, please. So this is very important. Actually, this section in fact, I would like to place most section 11 of the SAFEMA Act. If you see, At issue of any notice under section 6, the property is transferred by any mode. It can be any mode. The law uses the word any mode. It can be by power of attorney, it can be by way of seal deed, or it can be by way of mortgage, it can be by way of pledge. Such, and if it is subsequently forfeited, no, such transfer shall be null and void as per section 11. You know, the Supreme Court, this validity of section 11 is very, very, though actually you may think it is a very draconian provisions, but if the law has framed this very brilliantly. Why? Because in the absence of the section 11 provision, for example, I am offender. There is a property. I know very well that it will be forfeited. So after getting a notice from the department, I sell it to a very known person. For example, I sell it to my student. Knowingly well, the property worth 1 crore. I sell it to him for 70 lakhs. So here he may not be knowing that I am an offender. So why? Because he is not having any. So I am trying to give here what now I get 50 or 60 lakhs from that person. This money I don't keep any trace of that. And unfortunately, that person, even if he says that he is a bona fide purchase, then everybody will start selling. Every accused will start selling it to some X or Y friends or relatives or known person. So to circumvent the law and defeat the law. So under section 11, after issue of notice, very important that touch point is, suppose the notice is issued, assume that notice is issued on 1st March, section 6 notice is issued on 1st March 2015. After issue of notice, 1st March 2015, any transfer or any mode of transfer for the particular property where it is issued will be null and void. Suppose what happens before 1st March 2015, then if the authorities fund, suppose it is sold prior to the issue of notice, then the person is also liable to answer and he has to defend the case. Like we have seen two after second or third purchase, the purchaser has to prove his bona fideness so that the property will be released. But the law says after the issue of notice, if anybody purchases, that transfer is null and void. So you have to be very careful. In fact, unfortunately, I don't know the present stages in currently under PMLA regime. I don't know about the Benami Property Act. Under the PMLA regime, any property which is provisionally attached, the attachment order itself will be sent to the registration sub-register office where the property is situated. So immediately there is an encumbrance EC created on the ED enforcement directive. So nobody will buy. Suppose there is a property attached under PMLA in January 2020. So immediately after attachment, the authority will send a notice, copy of the notice to the registration department. The registration department will immediately in January 2020 create a EC. So if any purchaser wants to buy the property, if he puts the EC, it will say it is provisionally attached. So EC is created, so the bona fide purchaser is alerted. So here I don't want to comment about the property which is attached after 5 years or 6 years. That is a separate debate. So basically, you are protected as far as PMLA is concerned because now the action. I don't know about the Satima currently. I can tell you, in fact, after I left the office, I used to meet one of my friends who worked there. He is told, in fact, some few persons from Andhra Pradesh came to this office in 2002 or 2003 and inquired they are going to buy a property, whether they wanted to know whether this particular property is attached or there is any notice is issued under section 6 of SAFIMA. So many of the lawyers do not know what is SAFIMA. You imagine what is the state of the knowledge for the persons who are going to buy. I don't know whether they are scholars or they are also into this field, but they were able to get the details from the office because earlier there was no mechanism to publish all those things. So they gave to the office, get their concurrence. They get what is clarified that there is no notice issued against order. Then they went and purchased the property. Such is the knowledge. Because buyers have to be here. We are be aware of the. Next, any person aggrieved against a competent authority has to file an appeal to the ATFP. So this is the appellate tribunal, like SESTAT. So we have an appellate tribunal for procedure of property. This was created immediately after the SAFIMA was started. Now currently it is renamed like SESTAT, renamed as SESTAT. Now it is slowly transformed to GST appellate tribunal. So ATFP expansion appellate tribunal for procedure of property. Currently this appellate tribunal takes care of all the 4 enactments which we discussed in this section. NDPS Act for future, SAFIMA for future, Benami property for future, and PMA, all this work. So the entire this tribunal is now flooded with cost list 200 on a day. There will be 200, 300 matters listed on the board. Heavily hard to heavily loaded tribunal. Now the entire single tribunal, that is, they don't have any branches, only in Delhi. This takes care of. So any person aggrieved has to file an appeal before the appellate tribunal. Next. The tribunal can confirm modify. This is always there in any appellate form. Modify, annul, or consume the order of the lower authority. Next slide, please. Next, we are coming to, we have finished chapter, Safima is concerned, for which I have only explained what is the, who are all the persons who are attracted under Safima, what are the properties which are attracted under Safima, how the notice is issued under 6, how the attachment, the perpetual notice is confirmed under section 7, what happens to bona fide purchase, after issue of notice, anybody purchases, this such transfer is null and void as per section 11. Now coming back to chapter 5A. You see, after 76, in fact, Safima was not. It is a domestic legislation which has no international compulsion. As far as Chapter 5 is concerned, the basic idea behind this is, in fact, there is on a Vienna Convention 1980. Actually, this is an narcotic drugs, NDPS Convention, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic International Convention. This was conducted in Vienna in the year 1988. In fact, this was the first convention even for PMLA also. You will find apart from this Vienna Convention, various other conventions are also there under PMLA. But NDPS Act Chapter 5 was introduced to fall in to comply with the international convention. In fact, India as a member of WTO, as a member of signatory to the various conventions, legally is bound to enact the domestic law to take care of the. Otherwise, we are not a country like Pakistan to disobey international law. So we are a democratic country. We observe all the rules and procedures. So India immediately enacted in the year 1989. You see, within 1 year of this Vienna Convention in 1989, a separate chapter 68A, capital A to 68 Z were introduced in the NDPS Act. That entire chapter 5A will take care of forfeiture proceeding. Whereas Safima takes care of forfeiture proceeding. But under NDPS Act, only chapter 5A takes care of NDPS proceeding. I am not here discussing or going to in depth about the imprisonment or arrest or imprisonment under the NDPS Act. So because that is a separate position, the imprisonment may range from 10 years to 20 years for various offenses. There are not categories of narcotic drugs. Each is a different type of offenses. So here application. So we have seen who are all the persons are to be covered under Safima. Now who are 68 capital A says who are all the persons who are covered under NDPS Act. So for example, persons convicted under NDPS Act for 10 years or more are covered. Next is this even conviction will apply for an offence outside India, not leave alone India. The person is convicted for a narcotic drug offence outside India, he is also covered provided he is citizen of India. Detention under PIT NDPS and conviction under NDPS Act. So PIT NDPS is another. Now we have seen Kafi Kosa, consideration of foreign exchange prevention of smuggling activities as preventive detention. This PIT NDPS is a preventive detention statute. Prevention of illicit traffic. PIT is prevention of illicit traffic in NDPS Act. This is again a preventive detention. Anybody who is detained under PIT NDPS Act will also be directly covered under this chapter 5A. Next, person who is arrested or against whom arrest warrant is issued. Even an arrest warrant is issued under NDPS Act, or a person is arrested, there will be a trigger. He will be a person under that. Relative and associates of above. So again, it takes copies from Safima. Next, holders of property. We have seen already the same analogy is followed under NDPS also, like Safima. Next slide, please. Section 68B G explains what is illegally acquired property. So, in fact, I am not again discussing it. Almost is a mirror image of slightly next slide variation. It is a mirror image of Safima. So, property, it says property acquired before or after the commencement of chapter 5. So, you will find this unique wording used in Safima and NDPS. This particular wording is not used in PMLA for that matter, or that is why there is a lot of debate. In fact, there are out of 10 judgments, 5 judgments of the High Court said it will not apply retrospectively. 5 judgments are in support of the department says they will apply retrospectively because this particular wording is absent as far as the PMLA is concerned. So here the law specifically says before or after the commencement of chapter 5. Why? Because idea when a smuggler, let us assume that a smuggler is caught in the year 2000. His proceedings are initiated in the year 2000. He may be smuggling from 1980, or he may be smuggling from 1990, or he may be smuggling from 1973 also. So the idea being is to take care of all his previous assets and previous properties and to bring them into ambit. So the idea being is to catch all the property, not that from the date of his arrest or from the date of his detention or from the date of his imprisonment, properties will be covered prospectively. So the before or after commencement of chapter 5 will apply. Property acquired out of consideration is traceable to above. So any consideration traceable to the offense under NDPS Act is also covered. Next is property of previous holder. Again, the same analogy is good faith for adequate consideration is always there. Especially this will apply only when the person before initiation of proceedings has purchased the property, and being the owner of the property is also issued with notice, and he has to defend his case before the competent authority. Next slide. Here, if you see the definition of property under section 68B, it says property of every description. So this is almost used in all PMLA and other statutes. Movable, immovable, corporeal, incorporeal, tangible, intangible, deeds, instruments, evidencing title, derived from or used in illicit traffic. So the catch point here is to find in SAFEMA under any component of any law, it uses the word, though object says SAFEMA and forex violation, customs tax, and there is also tax violation, fiscal violation. Here if you see derived from or used in illicit traffic. So it is confining rather, no, it should all the property should be derived from illicit traffic or used in illicit traffic. So used in illicit traffic is like no any object we see in CRPC. Prohibition of illegal acquired property. We have seen the definition of SAFEMA. Here 68 capital C takes care of prohibition of illegal acquired property. Shall not, the laws prohibits illegally acquired property. So in other words, nobody shall hold illegally acquired property. In other words, it means such property is held against law 68C, it is liable for forfeiture by the authority. Shall not hold illegal acquired property by himself or through any other person. Any other person, it is very wide. It here does not use the word friends, associate, or confidant. Any other person. It can be unknown fellow. It can be bona fide also. Liable for forfeiture. Next property. Here one more catch point is there is a threshold limit. Loss is any property acquired prior to 6 years is not liable for attachment. I don't know the reason behind this particular provision. It otherwise, for example, in 2000 there is a provision under against Mr. A under NDPS Act. Suppose he has purchased a property in 1993. It is 6 years earlier to the date of issue of proceedings, so it will not be covered under Chapter 5. So if it is, let us say, if it is under purchased in 1996, if it is less than 6 years, it will be covered under NDPS Act. Next. So here, if you see, there is a paradigm shift from SAFEMA. SAFEMA says Section 18, Income Tax Authority has to conduct survey investigation and give in platter the illegally acquired properties, which will never happen. That is the very problem. Here at least 68 says identification of illegal properties goes very wide. If you see the provisions, here it takes care of lot of authorities are given powers to assist the competent authority to identify, trace, and bring out the illegal acquired properties of the drug offenders. For example, only including police officers. The officers under Section 53, the officers are like customs officers, excise officers, and state government officers, DRI officers, all those officers are covered, including police are covered. So here the investigation powers are wider, but we don't know how far the other agencies will support the competent authority office in trying to locate the illegally acquired property. Section 68H takes care of notice of illegal acquired forfeiture proceeding. Again, it is mutandis similar to this provision 6 of Section 6 of SAFEMA. Section 68H takes care of forfeiture, this adjudication, the confirmation of the forfeiture notice is again analogous to Section 7 of SAFEMA. So Section 6 is similar to Section 68H, Section 7 is similar to Section 68H. 68K, again it takes its copies from SAFEMA. It says similarly if the proceeds are proved up to beyond 50% on payment of fine in lieu of forfeiture, the properties can be released to the person concerned. Again, 68 term takes care of one of it, although any purchase after any mode of transfer after the issue of notice is null and void. This again is copied from Section 11. Next slide, please. Next, we come to the Benami Properties Provision of Transaction Act. So, if you see the Benami property, in fact, I'm not briefly, certain types of Benami properties are even approved, because for various reasons, if you see the citations for 40, 50 years, there are a lot of litigation happening. The Benami property is part of the regime. In fact, law also recognized for in certain issues like in trust and other categories, like in relatives, the property acquired in another way is permissible. What happened now when the property is acquired from illicit gains or tainted income in the name of others, only to circumvent the law, the government felt bad. So they brought this Benami Property Act. So Now, I am now covering the, earlier it was 9 sections. Actually, the first Benami Property Act had only 9 sections. So here, why it failed, because section 7 said the rules have to be framed. It was not framed from 1988 till 2006 when it was amended. So this is what happened. So they now, without rules, the law is like, without a driver, there is a vehicle. Still it is there. The vehicle was not even driven. So nothing happened. No result. Nothing. So in 2016, the law was amended with 72 sections. So old act, the idea behind when the finance minister said what is the rational gain, I'm not going deeper into this. Said if the old act was repealed and new act was brought in separately, it amounts to giving blanket check or blanket approval to the illicit happenings which happened during 88 to 2006, which government did not want to do that. So they brought it. Of course, there are nations which says that law has to apply retrospectively, and some are saying that courts say that it has to be cannot be applied retrospectively. Some say it can be applied retrospectively. That I am not going to discuss. So we have only no rules for frame under 8 till so section 5 no property was applied, because section 5 there is no mechanism to take care of the illegal Benami properties. So the law was not at all effective. No provision for vesting of property, confiscation was, so there was no provision. All the three made act redundant or only in the statute books. It was there only in the Bare Act rather than the liberation. So it got life only after 2016 enactment. Replacement. Next slide, please. Benami transaction means any transaction of the section 2 subclass A defines what is the Benami transaction. Any transaction in which property transferred to one person for a consideration paid or provided by another person. We have examples. So the consideration will be paid by one, whereas the property will be transferred to another person. This property, again, you can see this is not a purely a immovable property. It can be movable also. So immovable property will only have a lot of issues. As a movable property, you can always have, there are a lot of advantages as far as the movable properties are concerned. No person shall enter into section 2 and says this category, no person shall enter into any Benami transaction. Again, this is a prohibition. Law prohibits Benami transaction. 2.1 says no person shall enter into any Benami transaction. Section 3 subclass 2, there are two divisions as far as the amended Benami PBPT. So first 3 subclass 2 takes care of the existing offences. So if you see this imprisonment is up to 3 years. This is milder because it was there in the earlier act, the old act, which is a redundant act also. So that was copy pasted here. 3 years is the imprisonment. Just to let you know what are all this is in fact, you see NDPS imprisonment I not covered for Satima no imprisonment. Section 3 subclass 3 covers prospecting. So if you see this particular subclass 3 will cover the transactions which happened after 2006. Here punishable under chapter 7. And here the imprisonment may extend up to 7 years. So if you see the old prior to 2016, it will come under limited imprisonment of 3 years. Second, after 2016 up to 7 years. Next slide, please. So these are all the 4 types of transactions which are taken care of by the Act. This is property transferred. Normally the terminology used under the Benami properties, 2 persons are there. Benamidar is the person who is a de facto de jure. We have seen the same terminology here. Benamidar is the person who owns the property on behalf of beneficial owner. For example, only saying I buy a property and I register it in the name of Mudimanan. So I am a Benamidar and Mr. I am beneficial owner. Mr. Mudimanan is a Benamidar. So transferred held by A while consideration is paid by B. So it is held by A and the consideration is paid by B. Here there are 2 persons. Benamidar is the person who owns the property, but he would not have even spent a single paisa even for stamp duty or even for photocopying work. So he will go with without even first he will go to the register office, get the property transferred in his name. As the beneficial owner would have paid the entire property transaction fees, everything including the travel expenses, everything whatever it may be. So second category is transaction carried out in fictitious names. Non-existent. So this sometimes happens, this may not, I feel this may not happen in the case of movable property. So it is not possible. Now when you want to register a movable property because register office, both the Benamidar and the beneficial owner has to compulsorily visit the office. And they have to file their photos, they have to file all the Aadhaar and other proof, PAN proof, everything. They have to go and physically sign. So here the question of non-existent and fictitious name may not arise, except in the case where there is a forgery happens, like the Benamidar itself is a forgery person. His For example, PAN and Aadhaar card, everything is forged. In fill is photo is forged. There is PAN. Only the law also takes care of such things. It says any transaction carried out in fictitious this may happen in the case of other movable property. For example, I buy a car or I buy a gold jewelry. I buy a gold jewelry. I go to a particular jewelry and put this Modiman and name and give his PAN number. No, it is not fictitious. For example, I buy a gold jewelry and just give some other person's name. It is not at all not in existence. So this second category. Next is transaction where the owner is neither aware nor denies knowledge of ownership. This happens in certain cases. While I was addressing a class for a CA, a professional came and said later after conclusion of study, he said that one of his clients got around 8 crore money transferred by net into his account during this demonetization period. He doesn't know from which place. He was worried what to do. He was still holding that money. He was telling that 8 crore. Here, this fellow, the recipient is not totally unaware of what has happened. He can't even imagine. Even for 100 years, the entire family, entire street would not have thought about this particular money. Somebody has transferred to his account. It has come through net. So, but economic property law says the idea how to come out is the person has to go and intimate the authorities. Finally, the money will be forfeited to the government. If he proves that he is innocent, he will be let off. So here, transaction happens without the knowledge. So many had happened. In fact, out of 100 transactions, 20-30 transactions, I believe, this fellow just to pop off the money, they transfer to some other account. So this is where the owner is really not aware how it has come to his account. Transaction where the person providing consideration is neither fictitious nor traceable. So here it may be fictitious or not traceable. Suppose the Benamidar, for obvious reason, he was sent by beneficial owner, he was made untraceable, he was sent to, let us say, to Rajasthan or Bihar or some other place. He is untraceable, he can't be traced. So this category will also come under the text. There are 4 types of Benami transaction. Next slide. Same thing, the definition says where the property already seen where the property is held by a transferred LK person, where the consideration is paid. The main clue here is consideration to be paid by one person, where while the property is owned is in the name of another person, and the property is held for immediate or future benefit of person who provided the consideration. So it can be why, because sometimes when the property is transferred, they will have some understanding. There will be some sort of an arrangement between the person, because he also wants to protect it. Many times this Benamidar, there will be conflict between Benamidar and beneficial owner also. Benamidar will go and stay before the court. Even in earlier days, there were a lot of disputes in case law, where the Benamidar will say he is the real owner and the beneficial owner cannot come out with truth because he will be caught also. So there will be some sort of arrangement. It may be, in fact, even customs violation where the foreign trade policy, the imported car, which Mr. Mudiman know, to violate the foreign trade policy, there was a sale deed, mortgage deed was created for the, after 3 years of it was, it's a false mortgage deed. So because there is the sale is prohibited under foreign trade policy, what they did was they created a dummy mortgage deed where the property was mortgaged to the person. As if after 3 years the importer does not pay the money, the property or the car, the Ferrari car, will become the owner of come under the ownership of the person who was given loan. Like this, there will be some arrangement. In fact, this particular transaction was invented by one of the lawyers, which I don't want to name. Next, exceptions. So, in fact, you will find in fact this exception is not there under other 3 laws. There is no exception. We have seen the genuine exception is there. Bona fide purchase law. But only under Benami property, the law itself encourages or gives exemption. It says property held by Karta or member of HUF, because these are all the situations which the law provides. There are situations legally warrant such a holding of property. So a Karta holding a property or a member of HUF holding a property for the HUF is not covered under Benami property law. This is fiduciary capacity. So a company, director may be holding the property of the company, because a company artificial person cannot go and sell. Director has to spend the sale deed. So naturally the director or the managing director will be the owner of the property. He is also excluded. This is property in the name of spouse or child. Consideration paid from known sources. The law uses consideration, not income. For example, the consideration paid from known sources, it may be a loan from Marwadi, or it may be a loan from bank, or it may be a loan from friend also. So the property in the name of spouse or child is also not covered, provided the consideration is paid by the person from known sources. Next is brother, sister, joint owners also it is not covered. Again, the law uses the word consideration paid from known sources. It does not use the word known sources of income. It says from known sources. Maybe the idea behind it, known sources should be there has to be a legal source like a bank loan, a hand loan, or some other person who has that. These are the exceptions. Next slide, please. Here the adjudication is taken care of under the Benami slightly is different. So if you see the provision, this actually the Benami property is, as I told you, this is now taken care of by the income tax department. Yeah, the entire confiscation proceedings are separately done by, but however only the appeal proceedings are same for all the 4 enactments. Whereas the PMLA is taken care of Enforcement Directorate, the Benami property is taken care of by the income tax department. So after holding the section 27. The adjudicating authority, after giving opportunity to the there are 2, in fact, 2 authorities are there. The Deputy Commissioner or Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax will be the initiating officer, and the approving authority will be Joint Commissioner of Income Tax. So these authorities are inbuilt mechanism under the Act to take care of the Benami. So the entire mechanism is done by the Income Tax Department. Here again, notice has been issued by the adjudicating authority after giving opportunity. The confiscation will be done by the adjudicating authority. Here, no compensation. So there is no law does not provide it because the idea behind is forfeit the property, confiscate the property. Where is the question of compensation? So nobody will be compensated, whether bona fide, not bona fide or lawyer. As long as it is held as illegal property, confiscation. Next confiscation subject to appeal before tribunal. So the confiscation at first stage doesn't mean that if it is confiscated, next day it will be auctioned and the money will go to the government. So they will give time for the appellate proceedings to be completed. Again, appeal has to go through the appellate tribunal, the very same appellate tribunal which I discussed, appellate tribunal for procedure of property, PMLA and other act in Delhi will take care of the appeal. Next, property acquired by a person from Benamidar for adequate consideration before issue of SCN without knowledge, no confiscation. Law takes, suppose a property has been acquired, suppose A is the beneficial owner, B is a Benamidar. I buy the property from B because it is in the name of B. He is a Benamidar. I buy the property from B before issue of notice. The clue here is before issue of notice. Before issue of notice of notice, I buy the property from the Benamidar for adequate consideration, lawful consideration, licit consideration. In such a case, without having knowledge about the Benamidar activities or the Benamidar or beneficial owner, in such a case, this such property will not be liable for confiscation. It's like now coming back to the last enactment, money laundering. Many of you maybe knowing the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. I will try to slightly briefly tell about money laundering. Those who are not aware what is money laundering. In fact, the money laundering terminology was coined in US. In fact, any criminal will have a money. So criminal will have a money. Let us say I am a criminal in India. I have a money. I have 5 crore worth of. I am a smuggler. Let for example say I am a smuggler. 5 crore worth of money. So if I pay income tax on this 5 crore, income tax will definitely, because under income tax law, any income is taxable. Whether licit, legal, illegal, any income is taxable. Law does not say illegal income is not taxable because you can't have such a definition. So if I pay 30% tax, that doesn't mean that I will absolve of all criminal action. So suppose assuming that it is smuggled income, it is a smuggler's money. I am a smuggler. 5 crore is evasion under Customs Act. I am liable for action under the Customs Act separately. So here, even if you pay income tax, I am not given a green sheet. And though I may be getting a platinum card or a platinum certificate from the income tax department, that is not a clean sheet to me. So I will be liable for prosecution under the Customs Act. So what will happen? So here, the idea behind this, that is why my lawyers, what they know, they will try to project this as a legal income. So if I show it as smuggling income, again, the same example which I took in the last class, I will say, assume that I am only for example, I have 5 crore worth of income, I am a lawyer. Just for example, I am again giving a precaution. So I have this 5 crore worth of income. So if I pay income tax, will not be questioned, but later if they found out this is smuggler's money or customs evasion money, I will have to prosecute customs. What I will do is, I will try to treat this as professional income for me. So I will create fictitious invoice, fictitious bills and show that this 5 crore was taken by me as a professional income, as a lawyer's income, and I will try to declare in the income tax return as a professional income. So this will be a front. So this is nothing but laundering of money. So this is actually, this money is really a smuggled money. It is an illicit money. It is customs evasion money. But I am trying to project it as legal money by creating a fictitious invoice. I take a telephone directory, take all the names like A, B, C, A 1 lakh, B 1 lakh professional income, C 3 lakh professional income. As if I have given some advice or given some consistency, I book all the income as professional income. So this is the tainted money or illicit money is projected as licit money. This is what money laundering. In other words, money laundering is washing the dirty money and projecting it as a legal money. Why this word was coined? Because in USA, all the drug lords were having a lot of money. They are having around, for example, 1 crore worth of US dollars on every day. So if they, again, the very same problem. If they go and pay income tax, they will also not question that. So what they will, but tomorrow with evidence they are caught, they will be there the drug offense are very serious. They will be hauled up with a drug authority. What they did, no, they purchased the laundromats. Laundromats is like what now we have in India. Like same washing machine is there in big where the bachelors can go and give their clothes for washing. So the laundromats or the laundry are cash-driven shops where no bill, nothing, no ATM card, no ATM, no nothing. So all are there is no digital transaction. So they acquire around let us say 100 laundromats in US. So they have, let us say 1 lakh US dollars worth of illicit. They will try to project the money as if it has come from 100 laundry shops, and they will open account in the name of laundry shop and show it as income of the laundry shop. So in fact, in reality, it is a drug money, but it is daily deposited in the bank account as if it is come from the laundry shop in cash, and cash will be deposited. This is how the term laundering or the money laundering came into existence in the international regime. That is a story. So we come. In fact, coming back to the PMLA, this Prevention of Money Laundering Act is among very few after the NDPS chapter 5A. This is one of the few enactments where, based on 3 or 4 international conventions, this law was framed in India. In fact, the law was passed in 2002, but came into effect in 1st July 2005. Money laundering, if you see, concealing or disguises the origin of illegally obtained deposits, project them as originated from legitimate sources. Like, for example, I told you, lawyer's income, smuggler, it is actually a smuggler's income, but if it is traceable to smuggling income, it is a evasion of Customs Act. Customs Act in offense under this PMLA. So the person is liable under both the acts. So it will be projected as professional income. Professional income is a genuine income. It is not a tainted income, legal money. It is the example of how the illegal money is projected as arising out of legal money. This is predicate offense, scheduled offense. There are 2 aspects to a money laundering crime. First of all is a predicate crime, and second is a money laundering. There has to be a predicate offense or predicate crime. Like, for example, in the case law which I have referred, here the predicate offense is a customs smuggling. Smuggling is a predicate offense, is a customs law violation. So predicate offense has to be listed under the, here under, why it is also known as scheduled offense. Why? Because under PMLA there is a schedule. So in India we call it as scheduled offense. Some countries call it as predicate offense. Some countries call it as scheduled offense. Predicate crime also some countries call it. Internationally, this both they are all similar. Is a terminology used. Why? Because we have a schedule to the PMLA enactment. There are 3 parts: Part A, Part B, and Part C. Part A, there are 29 enactments. 29 Act. If any violation of the 29 Acts will come under, is a trigger. We have seen the trigger to SAFIMA is illegally acquired property, overall the person. Trigger to NDPS Act is overall the person. Trigger to Binami Act is the persons who are covered. Trigger to the PMLA is which are all acts which are listed as scheduled to the PMLA will be covered. So, for example, there are 29 acts under Part A. Part B, there is only 1 act. As in fact, it is also there in Part B. Part A, Section 135 of the Customs Act is there. Part B, Section 132 of the Customs Act is there. Only difference between Part A and Part B. Part A, 29 acts. Part B, only 1 act. The only difference is in Part B, it is having a threshold limit. So the government wanted, because the 132 of the Customs Act is false declaration, false documentation. Because there is a small bill of entry mistake, maybe 1 lakh worth. So you will be hauled up in PMLA. So there is no mechanism for the government to keep track of all the things. That is why they said under Part B, there is a threshold limit. So under 132 of Customs Act, if the offence is more than 1 crore value only, it will be covered under PMLA. So to just give an understanding, under 29 enactment, because same Customs Act is there in Part B also, Under 79 enactments, if the offence is predicate offence, only then the trigger will come to PMLA. There are certain enactments, just for a layman understanding, certain enactments are not scheduled offence or which are not listed on the PMLA, so they will not be covered under the, for example, GST is not covered, service tax is not covered, central tax is not covered, income tax is not covered. So there is income tax violation, there is a central tax violation, there is a service tax violation. So if all these violations, there will not be, it will not trigger PMLA. Why? Because we are not part of the schedule level. Similarly, FEMA is also not part of, there is a Hawala transaction. FEMA is also not part of the schedule level. So if a person, Mr. A, is doing a Hawala transaction, there is a FEMA violation, he will not be attracted under PMLA because this act is not listed under the 29 enactment under PMLA. Same thing, Section 3, whoever attempts Section 3, I'm just briefly saying, whoever, law uses the word whoever, anybody attempts to indulge knowingly. First is attempt, second knowingly assist, second knowingly a party, third is actually involved in any process or activity relating proceeds of crime. POC is proceeds of crime. So proceeds of crime is again, it's a definition, it's a very big definition. It will cover all the movable and immovable properties. It's a very wide definition as far as it almost takes care of the situation under the NTPS Act. So Section 3 is there. The violation of Section 3 is punishable under Section 4. Here the punishment may range from up to 7 years. And in the case of NDPS offence, the punishment under PMLA is up to 10 years. So the punishment, I am not going to discuss that. I am only trying to relate to forfeiture under PMLA. Next is usage of process or activity connected to proceeds of crime. Section 3 uses the word process or activity connected to proceeds of crime. So proceeds of crime is important. There is a Section 2 subclass 1 U takes care of proceeds of crime. Next slide. So we'll see what Section 2 and U defines process of crime. Any property derived obtained directly or indirectly by a person as a result of criminal activity relating to scheduled offence. So the criminal activity shall relate to scheduled offence. For example, the criminal activity relates to FEMA, it will not cover. If the criminal activity relates to GST, it will not cover. Criminal activity relating to Prevention of Corruption Act, it is covered because it is scheduled offence. Criminal activity relating to IPC, it is covered because many of the sections are covered. Criminal activity relating to Trademarks Act, it is covered because it is a scheduled offence. Or the value of any such property or value equivalent, this I am not going to, it's a very advanced level. So the law is trying to take care of situation why value or value equivalent is there. Because if the property is converted or there are camouflage or something is done, the law takes care of all the situations where the value equivalent is. Law will, there is no trace for the real proceeds of crime. It will try to attach the value equivalent also. This is a big debate going on. Only one court recently, Punjab and Haryana court has held that how to treat this value equivalent. So this will be another batch of case before the Supreme Court. So it will take at least 2-3 years. Here 2Y property means any property tangible, same thing, which we have seen under SAFEMA and NTPS, tangible, intangible, mobile, immobile, corporeal, incorporeal, wherever located. So your law today also you have seen the S-Bank against the S-Bank issue. The ED is trying to attach the properties in London for held by the promoters. So irrespective of the location of the property, it will be attached under PMLA. So the Part C of the schedule to PMLA takes care of cross-border offences. So there are mechanisms which the Indian courts will have corresponding letter of regulatory with the international courts, the other jurisdictions to take care of such a situation. Here, this is the Section 5 is important. What we have seen under Section 6 of the corresponding provision of the NTPS Act, very same, and the Section 27 of Benami Property Act. Here, provisional attachment order is the Section 5. Any person is in possession of proceeds of crime. The two conditions have to be specified. Any person, the law uses the word any person is in possession of proceeds of crime. Such proceeds of crime are likely to be concealed, transferred, or dealt with in frustrating the proceeds of proceedings. And why? Because no, this is there. Even on tax law, even on service tax, during litigation, there is a provisional attachment till litigation is pending. Because before, if it is not done, the accused will try to sell it off or part it off, frustrating the very. Suppose there is investigation, statement is recorded from the accused. Today it is recorded. So within 1 week or 10 days, you will try to, or 15 days, you will try to sell the bed. It is not possible immediately. Even if it is sold also, it can be easily attached. Law does not prohibit attachment even if it is sold. But unfortunately, the innocent will also caught in the crossfire. That is why the law he is giving this mechanism. So this urgency powers is vested with the enforcement directorate, where the property can be crucially attached pending trial of the criminal offense. So it till such time the attachment which is done under section 5 and which is confirmed under section 8 will be taken care of maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years or 10 years till the trial proceedings are over. Depending on the trial proceeding, it will be either confiscated to the government or returned to the person concerned. So within the provisional attachment is, for example, any property of the accused, whether movable or immovable property is found out during the investigation, that property will be attached. Here, the difference, as I told you, is unlike Satima, once the PO is issued, a copy is marked to the registrar. So you need not be worried. After attachment, if you buy the property, you will never buy because EC will have the name. So only problem is the property which is bought you 5 years back. Today, if it is valid, nothing can be done. So to write the case. We don't know whether what happened. No, suppose it has happened in one of our cases. The property was purchased by the person in 2015, whereas the attachment was done only in 2019. He is helpless, so he is fighting it before the forum. So 180, this limited validity is 180 days because within 180 days this has to be confirmed by the appealing authority. Here the difference is the appealing authority is separate authority sitting at Delhi, unlike the competent authority who is issuing, he is himself issuing notice, he himself decide the case. That is also held valid, and not that it is invalid. Here the notice is issued, the attachment is done by deputy director. The law says PMLA not below the rank of deputy director of enforcement directorate shall go with the attachment of the property. So the attachment will be confirmed by the adjudicating authority. There are 3 members of the adjudicating authority in New Delhi. There is a chairman, there is a member law, and there is a member finance who is the other one. There are currently 3 members. Only difference in the adjudicating authority is as far as PMLA is concerned, it will be heard by a single member. It can be by a member law separately, it can be member finance separately, or member chairman separately. But as far as the Benami property is concerned, it has to be only heard by 2-member bench, 2-member adjudicating authority. Same thing as far as the appellate tribunal is concerned. The major difference, I don't know the law, for obvious reasons, they can be very safeguard. So in appellate tribunal also, 2 members has to hear the appeal of the Benami property, whereas PMLA, it can be heard by a single member, even in tribunal say, and adjudicating authority state. So PA was sent to adjudicating authority. Simultaneously, the encumbrances is created. So even after the confirmation of the order, also there is another encumbrance created. So all are safe that as far as the property is attached is concerned, it is sometimes it is also published in the enforcement directorate website where you can get the details of the properties attached. Next. Already seen member chairman, member law, and member finance. Next notice is issued to defendant, joint owner, person holding property. So notice at the notice stage, section 8 of the Act postulates that the adjudicating authority shall issue the notice after the defendant, also the any person. It may be joint owners, it may be a bank. Suppose it is under mortgage of a bank. It may be under the mortgage of somebody else. It can be. It is held by somebody, another person. So it may be bona fide purchaser. Maybe it is not brought to the notice of the PAO authority. So all these persons have to be issued notice. So here the same thing. What happens? Source of it. All the forfeitures, the law says defendant has to place evidence of income earning assets by which property was acquired illicitly. So it is burden of proof. Section 24 says burden always, all the 4 enactment burden is on the accused. He has to show that suppose my property was 1 crore is attacked, I have to prove for each penny. Here it is not like, unlike here, Fatima and NDPS, more than 50 is okay. No Chantai, no okay. Here, as far as concerned, it is to be proved to the field. Even if 5% or 10% is deficient, the authority holds it still, because there are 4 judgments said even a small portion of poison will spoil the entire milk. So in fact, one judge remarked like this. So even if my 1 crore property I have proved over 90 lakhs, still it can be forfeited because I have proved the entire property is acquired out of licit sources. So income earning and assets have to be put before the adjudicating authority. It is income on the dependent over properties attached. Confirmation in full or partial. So there are 5 properties which are attached. You can confirm all the 5, or you can list 2, or you can list 2 of the properties and confirm 3 also. So there is it is not hard and possible that all by mechanically they are confirming all. We have seen these judgments are not, these orders are not placed in public domain. Only at the appellate tribunal stage we will know. Suppose if the provisional attachment order is confirmed, the aggrieved party has to file an appeal before tribunal. If it is not confirmed, the attachment is lifted. It is for the enforcement directorate who becomes aggrieved party, and they have to file the appeal before the appellate tribunal. But here there are cases which we know we came across. The attachment are also lifted based on the evidences placed by the defendants showing their income, earning, and assets. So the clue is you have to work on like in a trial to prove the evidence, place the evidence of income earning assets by which the properties were acquired illicitly. The appeal lies to ATF Appellate Tribunal for Procure. For his old name I am referring. Now it is ATPMLA, AT NDPS, AT SAFEMA, and AT PBBT. Possession after affirmation, the properties will be taken possession by the Authority Enforcement Directorate. Of course, there are mechanisms to go in for stay before the tribunal. So, on the conclusion of ML trial, money laundering trial, as I told you, the provisional attachment under PMLA, that is different. Under SAFEMA, once forfeited means it is subject to appeal, stands forfeited. When NTDS are forfeited, stands forfeited. But our Penami property, the attachment can subject to appeal. Here, this is subject to money laundering trial because there are two trials. Only one trial is as far as this is a civil proceeding which we are now referring. There is a criminal proceeding which is taking place under money laundering. PMLA section 44, section 44 and 45 takes care of it. 45 trial is happening before the special courts designated by each Chief Justice of India in Chennai. PSJ is taking care of money laundering trial. So, at the end of the money laundering trial, if the person is found not guilty, the property is released. At the end of the money laundering trial, if the person is found guilty, his property is attached is confiscated. So here there are the benevolent provision is there. Even if assume that in the first case, second case, if the attached property is confiscated, assume that I have purchased the property, I am a bona fide purchaser. There is a mechanism under the law which says that if I go and prove before the special court that I am a bona fide purchaser during the trial or after the trial, I can get the release of the property. So the law uses the word to the person concerned. In fact, Mr. Om Prakash Ji, senior counsel, when he was conducting ITC seminar, he referred to the very same word. Even in the word issue, to the person concerned, law does not say the holder or the person whose name is there in the sale deed. To the person concerned, it may be the banker who had given the loan. It may be the person who has purchased the property whose name has not been transferred due to various reasons. Or it may be the person who is a genuine purchaser. All those things, the person concerned will get the property. Now, bona fide third parties like last can approach the special court for release of property after trial or during trial. So initially it was after trial, now there is a provision even during trial also, because after trial means it will take 10 years for the trial to complete. By the time now the bona fide purchase may be live or not, see freezing the property. There is also provisions to approach during the trial to get the property lifted. This slide. This is the end. Yes. With this, I hope the session is complete.